nada. Venda xixi, cocaína, que a Odalina paga. Yeah. Odalina, tão menina, trabalha na esquina da rua, vendo o corpo. Quando cai, cala seu choro, ao gemer sufoca um grito. Ah, se é aqui que eu morro, ah, se é aqui que eu fico, ah, se é aqui que eu morro, ah, se é aqui que eu fico. Ai, se é aqui que eu morro, ai, se é aqui que eu fico, ai, se é aqui que eu morro, ai, se é aqui que eu fico. Foi procurar outra esquina, deu de cara com a esperança do amor dessa menina, Odalina. O Zé disse, meu amor, que queres para trocar o andar de cama em cama, braço em braço pro meu lar. E gemeu do seu gemer, e beijou do seu beijar, e a linda Odalina já amava só de amar. Calou seu choro, ao gemer falou seu grito. Ai, que eu aqui não morro, ai, que eu aqui não fico, ai, que eu aqui não morro, ai, que eu aqui não fico. Ai, que eu aqui não morro, que eu aqui não fico, ai, que eu aqui não morro, ai, que eu aqui não fico.
Good evening and welcome to Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. You can catch us live on SABC Plus app, DSTV, Audio Bouquet, Channel 802 and OpenView, Channel 628. I'm Thabiso Lehoko. I'm standing in for Thabiso who's currently out. And on this show, you can also follow us on social media for updates, highlights, and exclusive content. On X, we are at Channel Africa 1, Facebook, Channel Africa, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, TikTok at Channel Africa 1, and on YouTube, it's at Channel Africa 1.
We are on OpenView's audio bouquet, Channel 628.
The World Food Programme says it still cannot deliver its daily target of 2,000 tons of supplies into Gaza. This as talks about advancing things on the second stage of President Trump's 20-point peace plan are expected to get underway. A spokesperson for the UN agency, Abia Tefa, has called for all the border crossings to be opened.
Is that we still have 2 crossings only operational, and the northern crossings are yet to be opened, which is limiting the access to the most vulnerable areas. Roads are blocked and destroyed, which is a huge limitation to transport.
Leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party, Julius Malima's name has been mentioned at the Madlanga Commission. Witness A has testified that Malema is close friends with suspended Deputy National Police Commissioner Shadrack Sibiya. However, nothing about Witness A's testimony links Malema to the allegations being investigated by the Commission. Witness A says he was informed about Malema's alleged close relationship with the Sibiya by the head of organized crime, General Richard Shibiri.
He said Z is a close friend of Julius Malema, who is a politician, who then tends to be close to General Sibiya. So he was connecting the person that we arrested to Z, and then Z to Julius Malema, and then Julius Malema, who is friend to General Sibiya, the Deputy National Commissioner.
An appeals court in the U.S. has ruled that President Donald Trump can send the National Guard into Portland, Oregon, over the objections of local and state officials. The divided three-plans decision overruled a lower district court decision that issued a temporary restraining order blocking the use of the Guard. The lower court judge has ruled that Trump appeared to have exaggerated claims of violence in the city. Show Bryce Peace reports.
The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit disagreed with that lower court, preliminarily allowing the deployment of the National Guard to continue at immigration and customs enforcement facilities that have seen some protests in recent weeks. The state of Oregon is likely to appeal. The ruling gives the president a legal victory in his battle with local jurisdictions and cities who believe his deployment of the military is both excessive and unnecessary. Democratic-led states and cities have filed lawsuits seeking to halt the deployments, and courts have not yet reached a final decision on the legality of Trump's decisions to send the National Guard to assist in criminal matters.
Madagascar's coup leader, Colonel Michael Randriarin, who seized power this month, has named a businessman and consultant Herinsta Lama Rajao Rivelo as the island's new Prime Minister. Randriarin was sworn in as president on Friday, days after taking control in the wake of the youth-led protests that forced out his predecessor, Andrew Rajoelina, into exile. A senior lecturer at the Wits School of Governance, Dr. Frank Lekaba.
This appointment, approved by the High Constitutional Court, seems to be a legitimate government now in place in Madagascar. And I think it's going to be a very difficult terrain for SADC and the AU to navigate. Over the years, the developments in Madagascar's political system, particularly after 2009, they've been hinged upon what the High Constitutional Court pronounces itself on. So the High Constitutional Court has been a cornerstone, particularly after 2009, in resolving public affairs in Madagascar. And SADC and the AU have kind of given this High Constitutional Court respect as a body that mediates the political developments in Madagascar.
Japan's lower house of parliament has elected the country's first ever female leader. Sanai Takaichi, who heads the governing Liberal Democratic Party, will, however, lead a minority government. Takaichi is reported to be a loyal conservative and has not been keen to push for women's rights. The BBC's Shaima Khalil has more on the challenges facing the new Prime Minister.
She faces a sluggish economy with households still struggling with inflation, with stagnant wages, with cost of living, but also, I think, winning the trust of voters back amid these corruption scandals that have marred the party. And Donald Trump is coming later this month. She faces a mammoth diplomatic task of hosting him and of trying to hash out the tariff deal between Japan and the United States.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
The United Nations World Food Programme says food supplies into Gaza have increased since the US brokered ceasefire came into effect. However, aid deliveries remain far below the levels needed to address the worsening humanitarian crisis. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabanya reports on the situation as the World Food Programme calls for more access and the opening of all border crossings.
After weeks of limited access, the World Food Programme says food assistance is finally reaching parts of Gaza following the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But despite the progress, the agency warns that only 2 crossings are open and aid deliveries are still well below target. Abia Itifa, Senior Regional Communications Officer and spokesperson for the World Food Programme, explains.
So far, we've had over 6,700 tons of food. That's enough for close to 500,000 people for 2 weeks. Daily deliveries continue, and they are now averaging around 750 tons. That's much better than what we had before the ceasefire, but it's still well below our target, which is around 2,000 tons every day.
Itifa says communities have responded positively to the ongoing relief efforts, with vulnerable groups among those benefiting the most.
The response has been really overwhelming. People are showing up in large numbers, grateful for the efficiency of the delivery of food assistance, as well as the dignified way of people standing in line, quickly getting their food rations, and especially impacting the most vulnerable, the women, female-headed households, the elderly.
Despite the slight improvement in aid delivery, the WFP says many families continue to ration what little food they receive, fearing that supplies could once again run out.
People are hopeful. There is cautious optimism, but the food that they are receiving, they eat part of it and they ration and keep some of the supplies for emergency because they are not very confident how long the ceasefire will last and what will happen next.
Itifa says while the ceasefire has helped reduce prices, many in Gaza still cannot afford to buy food, making the continuation of peace critical to preventing famine in the north.
We've seen reports that, because supplies are getting in, the food prices have dropped, but not to the level that it can be affordable. There's still a huge problem of access. People, can find food in the market, but it's out of reach because it's extremely expensive. Sustaining the ceasefire is vital. It's the only way we can save lives and push back on the famine in the north of Gaza.
Meanwhile, scenes of piled-up waste scattered across various areas of the Gaza Strip as concerns are growing over mounting health and environmental risks as municipalities face major difficulties in managing solid waste following the destruction of infrastructure and the loss of access to the 2 main dumping sites on the outskirts of the enclave. In an effort to address this crisis, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, has intensified its work to organize and manage these temporary sites as part of its broader efforts to support Gaza's reconstruction and improve health and environmental conditions for residents. Jaco Celius is the UNDP resident representative in Palestine.
So UNDP is also working very actively in solid waste management. It is a major challenge for the rebuilding of Gaza, but also for making sure that health and environmental issues are addressed. How the solid waste is managed at the moment is very problematic because the 2 main dumping sites on the outside perimeter of Gaza is not as accessible anymore. So unfortunately, many temporary waste sites have to be created. There's 47 such waste sites. UNDP manages how these sites are set up so it protects the population. As you can see, unfortunately, internally displaced people are living very close to these sites, but we also rehabilitate it. So we make sure that it is covered and make sure that the diseases cannot spread to the population.
According to Celius, unfortunately, many internally displaced people are living close to these sites, but they are working to rehabilitate and cover them to prevent the spread of diseases in surrounding areas. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, tensions in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, have fled once again after a drone attack struck several parts of the city early this morning, just days before the government was set to reopen Khartoum International Airport to limited civilian flights. Residents reported loud explosions in the Bari and Omdurman districts overnight, sending plumes of smoke into the sky and reigniting fears that the fragile ceasefire between the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces is on the brink of collapse. We now talk to Dr. Abdul Karim Al-Goni, a Sudanese political commentator, about the latest developments. Dr. Abdul, good evening and welcome to Channel Africa.
Thank you very much, and thank you for handling issues of Sudan. We really need to see it still on TV.
Doctor, what may have it led to this drone attack? Do we know who the suspects are and what could have it been the strategic objective?
You see, as you know, this war has been going on for this is the third year now, and it has displaced more than 24 million, that is more than half of the Sudanese. Everyone has been displaced by this war, and millions that are in the bordering countries. And the army wanted to tell people, no, the war has stopped and everything is peaceful and life is normal. And so they made some improvement in the international airport in Khartoum, and they wanted to do some local flights to tell people that life has come to normality and there is no war in Sudan. And of course that is not true. So the other rival group have told them, no, don't do this because the war is still continuing. If you don't believe, you are not going to use the airport of Khartoum. And this is what they did. They actually bombed the airport of Khartoum and other military areas in Khartoum just to show them that the war has not stopped.
Now, how significant is this attack in the broader context of this wrangling between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces?
You see, the significance of this attack is that, as you may know, in the last few weeks, the U.S., together with Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Egypt, have come out with a roadmap to stop the war, starting with a 3 months ceasefire for humanitarian reasons, so that the Sudanese can rest from the sounds of the bombings and have something to eat. And during these 3 months, people can at least rehabilitate some of the clinics and hospitals so that people can get medicines. But although the rebel support forces agreed to this roadmap, but the army is refusing, is going one step forward, 2 steps back. So last week, Al-Burhan went to Egypt, and in Egypt he said, we are very happy about this process and we are waiting for the next meeting that will happen at the end of October. But when he went back to Sudan, the Muslim brothers who are really ruling Sudan asked him to come with another statement. So he came with another statement saying, I'm not going to negotiate with anyone, not to the quartet, not the RSF, until I kill all the rebels, which means the rebel support forces. And of course, everyone knows this is impossible, and everyone knows there is no end to this war by military means. It has to go to negotiations. So the significance of what has happened this morning in Khartoum airport is to tell the army that unfortunately you have to think differently. It's better you follow what the quartet is saying and prepare yourself for negotiation so that we stop this war and we allow a process for peace to happen.
Do you foresee this war continuing, or do you think the negotiations that you've been talking about could signal perhaps a stop anytime soon?
You see, I want to be very frank with you. The wars in the Middle East, if we take them as a precedent, it is very bad. The Iraqi war continued for more than 20 years. The Syrian war continued for more than 14 years. Libya war is more than 15 years still continuing. Yemen war is still continuing. People are hoping that the Sudanese war will not follow the same track. People hoping that the Sudanese will be more wise and get lessons from the other wars in the Middle East. But it's very clear our military are adamant that they are not going to be weaned from power, and they are not in Sudan to protect the Sudan borders. They are in Sudan to rule. And that a military officer who has brass on his shoulders is made to rule, not to go and protect the borders of Sudan. This is why they have created more than 20 militias and subcontracted them to do the war for them. Actually, if you look at what is happening in Khartoum today, there are militias everywhere. There is no army. If you look all over Sudan, there is no army. It is a militia that is putting itself in the attire of the army, but raising their own flag. There are more than 5 or 6 militias that are now in Khartoum. Everyone, although wearing the clothes of the army, but they are raising their militia flag. So practically the war now is in a very bad shape in Sudan. We hope that the army, Al-Burhan, takes a different stance so that this can change.
Let's come back to this drone attack. Do you think it's a desperate attempt on either faction, or it could just be signaling a warning that this war has actually reached an advanced stage?
You see, this is not the first time those drone attacks happen. They happened before in Port Sudan, which is the administrative new capital of Sudan. In Port Sudan, the RSF previously sent more than 50 drones into Port Sudan, hitting the airport, 3 or 4 army bases there, and petrol stations, and whatever they are claiming they are supportive of the army. That happened in Port Sudan, and it happened in Khartoum, and it happened in other areas of Sudan. They are just another sign of this war, and another sign that there is no shortage of ammunition for the war to continue. We know that Iran is supporting the government with planes are arriving in Port Sudan on a regular basis, bringing in ammunition. We know that there are Iranians who are training the Sudanese in Port Sudan and in Khartoum. We know that Egypt is supporting the army directly, and we know that Qatar is supporting with a lot of other things, and Turkey. There is a lot of drones. The Turkish drones are now used in Sudan. So the two parties and the Rapid Support Forces joined hands with a number of civilian groups and parties and created a new government in Niala, which is also their administrative capital. And they said the government of Port Sudan is not recognizable because it came after a coup, and even the African Union is not recognizing it. It's just a de facto government. We will create another de facto government, and we wait for the Sudanese to tell us which of the two de facto governments they will prefer. And both of them are receiving support from a number of other countries. Even the Ta'sis government now, which is in Niala, is saying we are no longer just another fighting army. We are now a government. Even if you don't recognize us, we are a government and we are entitled to go and look for ammunition and for military from wherever we want. And this opens the door very wide for both Port Sudan and Niala to get more ammunition for this war to continue. And this is what we are fearing. And the Sudanese have had enough of this war. They have. This is the third year where people have not cultivated. We have not. You see, we cultivate according to the rainy season. This is the third rainy season that people are unable. So there is a scarcity of food, and it became very costly for many people. And at the same time, people don't have income. Previously, they have their income from agriculture. Now the agriculture is not working. The government offices are closed. They are getting no salary. And there is no other businesses. And this is why famine is a big problem that is facing Sudan now. The UNICEF is saying millions of under 5-year children are going to die of malnutrition in Sudan because their parents cannot afford to give them proper food during this time. And this is why all of us are hoping that the army will take this initiative of the US and the 3 Arab countries seriously and follow suit with the RSF, who accepted the initiative, that the army will accept the initiative so that at least the Sudanese people can have some rest for some time, at least 3 months.
Dr. Abdul,
so we keep our fingers crossed that something is going to happen.
You know, as a parting shot, in a nutshell, won't this open the door for more renewed talks from the African Union and IGAD, diplomatic efforts that could trickle in the art of negotiation?
Yes, you see, let me be very frank with you. Everyone is working for this war to stop. President Mbeki a few months back have had an initiative here, an African peace initiative, and he called both parties and tried to negotiate something and convince them that peace is better for both of you than war. And it's not only South Africa that is looking for that. The African Union is pushing initiatives. The European Union, the Arab League, neighboring countries of Sudan, everyone is for peace in Sudan because they know that there is no military end to this war. It is only the army of Sudan that is supported by the Muslim Brotherhood of Sudan that are insisting on the war. This is why the Sumud, which is a civilian movement chaired by our Prime Minister, our civilian Prime Minister, Dr. Hamdok, have asked the international community to add the Muslim Brotherhood movement of Sudan to the list of the terrorist organizations, so that people push them to accept and stop the war. And if you look at it now, everyone wanted peace in Sudan except this group. So you don't understand what is their objective when they refuse the cessation of hostilities. And all of them, they see the suffering that the Sudanese are having, not only in Sudan, but even in neighboring countries, in Cairo and in other countries. So we hope that they will come to their senses and they will accept at least this final initiative from people who all hold good hope for Sudan, that Sudan is a country that is rich, and if this war stops, within a very short period, Sudan can stand up again and be a very successful country.
Dr. Abdul, thanks for your time this evening. That was Dr. Abdul Karim Al-Goni, a Sudanese political commentator, talking to us on the line.
Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for Hard Talk discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
In a stunning development from France, former President Nicolas Sarkozy has begun serving a prison sentence after a Paris court upheld his conviction for corruption and influencer peddling. Sarkozy, who led France from 2007 to 2012, insists he is innocent and vows to continue fighting what he calls a political and judicial injustice. The court confirmed that Sarkozy attempted to bribe a senior magistrate in 2014 by offering him a prestigious job in Monaco in exchange for confidential information about a separate investigation into his campaign finances. The former president was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with 1 year to be served behind bars and the rest suspended. To talk to us more about this, we are joined on the line by Dr. Frank Matthys, a senior researcher at the United Nations University. Dr. Frank, good evening.
Very good evening to you.
Doctor, France has just seen a former president sent to prison, a rare moment in Western democracies. How significant is this ruling in terms of accountability and political culture in France?
Yes, indeed. It's a very rare moment to see a former head of government and head of state going behind bars. So it's certainly not something that happens often, neither in France or Western Europe, but globally speaking. So in this sense, it is important as a signal against impunity of political leaders, but also as a symbol to try to reinstate trust that citizens might have lost in the political leadership in their government. So in this sense, I would definitely say it's very significant to see this happening today in France, but also potentially in other countries.
And how independent is the French judiciary?
To a large extent, it has been under significant pressure. This has been a court case that has received a lot of media attention. The judges have been under tremendous stress, so they have received threats and to them personally. So there has been attempt to influence this case. But one could say that they've withheld that or tried to stand up against it, and there are, of course, some opinions that would say, well, there is some political motivation behind it. However, this is not properly proven or evidenced that the judges in this case would have a sort of a political agenda behind their verdict. It's been very well argued. They've demonstrated of which facts he has been accused of, which ones he has been called culprit, and in which ones not. So it's a very long verdict, and they've explained that just sending him into prison is precisely related not only to what has been done, but also he is supposed to be a public figure that the country looked up to and had trust in, and this warrants to have this type of verdict that includes a prison sentence.
The former president has vowed to say he'll challenge and continue to challenge his sentencing. Do you think he has a leg to stand on?
Well, it is, of course, in his right to appeal. I think it's going to be very difficult. He might get a lesser fine in terms of a reducement in the years he is supposed to serve in prison. So that's always possible, but it seems very unlikely that the judgment as such would be fundamentally changed. So there has been very strong evidence about him actively seeking for financial support from the Libyan government at the time. So it's going to be very difficult to get out of that. So while he will certainly proceed, so his sentence already has begun. Also, so he's spending the first night in prison tonight. So he still will appeal, but the sentence has already started at the same time.
How do you think this would position France in the international political system? As relevant as one country which has always suggested that it champions a global champion of democracy and justice?
Yes, on the one hand, you can say that the judiciary system is working. It's not the first high-profile politician that has been sentenced by the French judicial system. So we've had François Fillon before, the former prime minister who was a presidential candidate who was convicted for embezzlement, and Marine Le Pen, the opposition leader who has been presidential candidate several times as well, has been recently convicted. So based on that, you could say there is a system that is very much vibrant and that is trying to keep political power in check. At the same time, you could say the fact that there is quite a number of cases, and now also hence to the fact that there's a problem in political power, in concentration of political power, and power abuse in France. Not necessarily in France alone, but it sheds the light on France particularly. So you could say it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, yes, France can internationally stand as a good example or against impunity of political leaders, but at the same time, it also shows that corruption and political power have gone hand in hand, and that this means that there's something about the political system in France that needs to be reformed as well.
Dr. Matthys, let's look at the broader terms. How important is it for democracies to demonstrate that no leader is above the law, even years after leaving office?
I think it is essential to showcase that there is no more favorable treatment to someone who has been in official positions, that has wielded significant power, personally speaking. It is an issue that we see globally with many former presidents, that there's some kind of one could call it a kind of a grandfather clause that if they have been in power, that afterwards they will be treated more favorably or more leniently, that no one is going to dig up too much beforehand. This is a problem. It is generally the convention that while political leaders are in power, they are granted immunity. So whether they're presidents, ministers, or MPs, that to a certain extent they are granted immunity, that there are higher thresholds for in order to impeach someone that is sitting in power. But that makes it all the more important that once they leave power, once the immunity that they have been granted through the office expires, that at that point they have to be taken accountable. And this partly can explain also why some of these things emerge a longer time period afterwards, so that it's more difficult in the moment itself while they're still in office, but this makes it more important to dig up. And trying to not showcase any favorable treatment. There is, of course, a tendency also in France now to still show some solidarity. So we've seen he was able to visit the current president Macron last Friday. The Ministry of Justice has said that the Minister of Justice will visit Sarkozy while he's in prison. So there is still a sentiment among the political elite in France that to pay respects in certain way to a former president, but especially the judiciary needs to be independent of that, and I think in that sense it is a very good signal, also globally speaking.
While we're still talking about the global precedents, does Sarkozy's case strengthen the global precedents for holding leaders accountable, or do you think it might discourage political elites from relinquishing power peacefully in the near future?
That's a good question. What will be ultimately the effect? I think there are different signals that this case sends out. There's first a signal against foreign involvement, foreign financing of elections, because that was at the heart of this case. That there had been meddling with campaign financing from the outside. So sending a signal that those politicians that will accept illegally money from the outside in order to gain power, that this is under scrutiny, and that is still happening today from interferences from different countries. But there is indeed also the signal of showing that impunity is not granted. This is the case for penal issues, as has been the case here. But one could argue also more broadly for crimes against humanity, so for presidents that have against which there's a warrant from the International Criminal Court, for instance. So whether it's a Israeli president and others, that the judiciary sends a signal more broadly that it might be very difficult to persecute someone during office, but that afterwards efforts will be made in order to hold politicians that are being persecuted for wrongdoing during the time in their office will still be persecuted afterwards. So I think in that sense it is a strong signal, but as you hint at, it can have this unintended consequence of pushing leaders to try to cling onto power even longer, because they might fear that afterwards they will lose the immunity that is accorded to them for their office. So this is indeed a possibility, so that it makes the stakes higher of that losing power is not only losing power, but it's also losing legal protection. So indeed it could have this backfiring effect that it creates an additional motivation for leaders to not wanting to leave office and staying on for second, thirds, etc. mandates.
Dr. Mathys, thank you for your time this evening.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That was Dr. Frank Mathys, a senior researcher at the United Nations University.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Let the good times roll. From the 10th of October, make a note. Channel Africa is stepping into a brand new era with the launch of our upgraded website and app. It's easy, fresh, and always on your fingertips. Wherever you are in the world, Africa's voice is just a click away. The future of Channel Africa goes live from the 10th of October. Don't miss the moments. Hour, unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Thanks for listening to Channel Africa. My name is Thabiso Lehoko. I'm standing in for Thabiso Magwetla.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Tensions are escalating in Madagascar, where thousands of mostly Gen Z protesters have taken to the streets of Antananarivo, furious over the coup leader's appointment of a new prime minister. The demonstrations erupted after Colonel Michael Arendriaarianin, who seized the power following the impeachment and a flight of President Andry Rajoelina, named a close military ally to head the transitional government. Young protesters say the move betrays the promises of democratic reform and transparency, accusing the new military leader administration of tightening its grip instead of preparing for elections. To talk about this, we are now joined by a Malagasy political commentator, Eli Ramanakavana. A very good evening, Eli.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening indeed. Mr. Ramanakavana, Madagascar is once again in political turmoil. What is at the heart of the Gen Z's anger over the coup leader's appointment of a new prime minister?
So, what angers the youth about the new prime minister is his close ties to Mamra Vatmank, a powerful businessman and key figure of the Rajoelina regime. Vatmanga was one of the main targets of the Gen Z's protests. The youth demanded his removal, and now, through this new Prime Minister, Rajoelina, they feel he's making a comeback. What shocks most is the total lack of consultation with the youth, as if there's a deliberate effort to erase their voice.
Eli, many young protesters see this as a betrayal of the promise of democratic transition. Do they have any legitimate grounds for concern? And given the developments that have erupted, do you now perhaps believe that Gen Z willed a lot of influence in Antananarivo in Madagascar?
I think that the legitimacy lies entirely with the youth. 2/3 of Madagascar's population are youth. If they demand a prime minister free from any link to former political predators, where is the problem in that?
Tell us about the backup. How is the political spectrum feeling on either sides? Have they received these appointments warmly, or perhaps could there be a sense of bitterness?
I don't hear the question.
How has this appointment been received across the various political spectrums? Is there indication of support beyond the military circles?
So the name was proposed by the political coalition Fresankin, composed of the opponents of the former regime. So yes, the appointment has support from parliament and military approval, but the people, and especially the youth, reject the prime minister and are already threatening to return to the streets.
So we recently seen these large numbers of young people leading the demonstrations. What does this tell us about the political awakening and frustration of Madagascar's youth? What are the issues?
So in Madagascar, the traditional social order gives no voice to the younger generation. The Zanak children are expected to stay silent while their elders rule. Yet it is the youth who suffer from a failed system inherited from those elders. Behind demands for water and electricity lies a deeper cultural and social struggle. the fight for the right of the young or the majority to speak and heard in the nation's affairs. This has become unbearable, giving rise to a genuine revolution whose ultimate goal is to invert this order of speech and grant institutional legitimacy to the voices of the youth.
Ellie, given what you've just mentioned, do you think these youth-led protests could evolve into a broader pro-democracy movement, or are they likely to be contained by security forces should this trend persist?
So these movements have already toppled the former Radziwiłł and Ravatmanga regime. Now the goal is to assert their voice and secure a political victory.
Colonel Michael Randrianarina has justified his actions as necessary for national stability. How credible is that argument in the current climate?
As for the motivations of Colonel Randrianarina and the military, I don't know. But armed men taking power is never reassuring. But they are here now. So the Gen Z movement must adapt, compose, and impose its own revolution.
Do you see this bringing stability to Madagascar? Is Madagascar heading toward a prolonged military transition, or is there a realistic path back to civilian rule?
So the new Prime Minister, Mr. Randrianarina, is a civilian and will form a civilian government. But it's entirely possible he'll dismissed soon because public anger is immense since his nomination, and Gen Z is preparing to return to the streets.
What signs have you noticed, because you keep on referring to Gen Z going back to the streets and possibly Mr. Michael Randrianarina being perhaps toppled again? What signs are you seeing? What's the sentiment in Madagascar?
So there is a lot of anger. So in social media, Gen Zs talk a lot about this. A lot of politicians are not satisfied by the decision.
No, thank you very much, Eli Ramanakavana, Malagasy political commentator for the time, as well as shedding light on developments taking place there in Madagascar.
Okay, thank you.
No matter where you are, Channel Africa is always with you. Let the good times roll. From the 10th of October, make a note. Channel Africa is stepping into a brand new era with the launch of our upgraded website and app. It's easy, fresh, and always on your fingertips. Wherever you are in the world, Africa's voice is just a click away. The future of Channel Africa goes live from the 10th of October. Don't miss the moments. We are on OpenView's audio bouquet. Channel 628.
Around 676 million women lived within 50 kilometers of deadly conflict last year. It's the highest figure since the 1990s. That's one of the key findings of the UN Secretary General's annual report on women, peace and security released on Monday. The report highlights the role that women play as peacemakers, describes how conflict affects women overall, and outlines the UN Secretary General's goals for the key agenda. It says civilian casualties among women, children quadrupled compared to the previous 2-year period, and conflict-related sexual violence increased by 87% in 2 years. More from Pablo Castillo Diaz, Policy Specialist for Women, Peace and Security at UN Women.
The report has some alarming findings. In 2024, 676 million women lived within 50 kilometers of a deadly conflict. This is the highest number since the 1990s. So more women and girls are affected by conflict. We also found that rising military expenditure and exclusion of women from conflict resolution is not making our world safer, it's making our world more dangerous. We have the highest number of active conflicts since 1946. In 2024, almost 9 out of 10 peace processes had no women negotiators at all. Women accounted for just 7% of negotiators and 14% of mediators, despite overwhelming evidence that when women are at the table, peace agreements are more inclusive, more just, and more durable. Those peace agreements that are supported by the UN do a little bit better, with 18%, but still way below the 1/3 minimum target that the UN has set for itself, and the parity goal that the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women has set for the world. On top of that, wars are being waged on the bodies of women and girls with shocking disregard for international law. I would say even disturbing levels of cruelty. Civilian casualties among women and children quadrupled compared to just 2 years ago. Sexual violence in conflict rose by 87% in just 2 years, at least in those cases that are verified by the UN, which represent a small set of the actual problem. 58% of global maternal deaths take place in 29 crisis countries alone, and we think this could get worse because we have so much blocked reproductive health care, bombed maternity wards and hospitals, and a general backlash against women's health and reproductive rights. And on top of that, we have dwindling aid. Foreign aid has been dropping, and only 0.4% of aid to conflict-affected countries goes to women's organizations. These are the very groups that prevent violence, deliver life-saving services, build peace at the community level.
Such startling findings, what are some of the recommendations that are contained in this report?
Changing this very grim picture requires political will backed by resources, earmarked funding, quotas, targets, incentives, mandatory requirements. This is why these reports also a call to action to governments, the UN system, all peace and security actors to reverse course. So it asks for clear targets and quotas to ensure women's full, equal, and safe participation in peace and political processes. This is something that still doesn't happen. We have quotas in national and local deliberative bodies, for example, quotas for governments in some cases, but not really many quotas in peace and security decision making, whether peace processes or national dialogues and political transitions and these kinds of things. And the UN has said that they support a target of a minimum 1/3 of participants in UN-led peace processes. We've also set other targets that are not being met. At least 1% of official development assistance going directly to women's organizations in conflict-affected countries. At least 15% of the same ODA to conflict-affected countries going to gender equality as a principal objective. The report also asks for greater accountability, not just for conflict-related sexual violence, which is an issue that the world has been addressing with more robust measures and funding, even though this funding is also dropping now and conflict-related sexual violence continues unabated, but also to reproductive violence and to gender-based persecution and just broader violations of women's rights and atrocities that happen to women and girls in war. And it also calls for a redirection of resources away from arms and towards peace building and women-led recovery. This can include changes in employment policies, social protection systems, access to land, housing, inheritance and property rights, and reconstruction plans and post-conflict financing. that transform women's economic security. At a more micro level, I guess at an easier level that perhaps doesn't require so much, we're asking for changes in bureaucratic requirements and risk thresholds in donor policies to allow small grassroots local women's organizations in conflict settings to have an easier path at accessing quality, flexible, and consistent funding. And finally, the report also devotes a great part of its contents to the need for a gender data revolution on women, peace, and security, because we still have lots of gaps in our knowledge, and we need to take women's experiences in crisis into account and make sure they're fully counted and fully visible.
South Africa's African National Congress, ANC, held its much anticipated bilateral with the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU. The one-day meeting was attended by some of the party's top officials, including President Cyril Ramaphosa and the party's Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, and COSATU President Zingizwa Losi and her General Secretary Soli Phethwe. The two alliance partners discussed, among others, the ANC Economic Action Plan, as well as the state of the alliance and the National Democratic Revolution and preparations for the 2026 local government elections. Ntebu Mukobo has more.
We are holding this bilateral, which has been long overdue, in COSATU House, and we are welcomed by the officials, or office bearers as they call them in COSATU, national office bearers of COSATU. We are truly honored to be welcomed in this way.
President Ramaphosa appreciates that the bilateral between COSATU and the ANC is finally taking place. Relations between the two entities date back to their struggle days. Among other things, their meeting took stock of the state of the alliance, discussed the socio-economic transformation, and COSATU's 40th anniversary plan for later this year, as ANC spokesperson Mahlengi Pengu explains.
The leadership of the African National Congress, led by the President, is leading a delegation in a bilateral meeting with COSATU. The substance and the symbolism of renewed efforts at strengthening the revolutionary alliance that we've enjoyed over the many decades of struggle. Some of the items that the ANC is going to be presenting will be the Economic Action Plan adopted by the National Executive Committee of the ANC, and seeking to get feedback and seeking to get a sense from the Federation about how they feel and whether that does address the concerns of workers and the poor and the improvements that we must make there too.
COSATU, on the other hand, welcomed the meeting as an attempt to improve the well-being of the poor and the working class, as its spokesperson Matthew Parks elaborates.
It's a welcome opportunity. The ANC is our alliance partner, it's a leader of government, and I think it's a chance for us to reflect on the state of government, state of public services, municipal services. How can we improve them? How can we really help deliver that better life for working class communities? It's a chance for us also to raise concerns about the performance of the economy, a high unemployment rate, high poverty rate. What can we do to protect vulnerable businesses? What can we do to give more relief to workers, to create jobs, to get the economy moving? Of course, we also have local elections in a year's time. The state of local government in many areas leaves much to be desired across the country. So what can be done in the next 12 months to really fix municipal services, to really improve the quality of local government?
The ANC meets COSATU at a time when its relationship with the SAC...
Now that wraps up Africa World Hour this evening. An installment of African World Hour, another one, is coming up tomorrow. From myself, Thabiso Lehoko, producer Dumelo Zulu, technical producer Didi Makau, and the rest of the Africa World Hour team, thank you for listening. For comments on the show, send us an email. It's at info@channelafrica.org. Goodbye.